all directions have always been written until the end of the state of emergency period, whenever that relevant state of emergency period has been extended. So that applies to all directions across all periods. So they will be revoked at any point where we think the settings need to be changed. So that's applied previously when we've already had a flagged date of easing of restrictions. We've still had an end date to the end of the state of emergency period. So there's absolutely nothing different in the way directions have been written at this stage. That's always been the way that legal have approached it, and nothing should be read into it as having an intention to extend beyond a day beyond when we think they need to be in place. And for now, that's 5 days, absolutely.
Why not write into just 5 days and then extend?
Oh, you'd have to ask legal about why they draft in the particular way that they do, but clearly they've done it all the way through from the beginning of last year with respect to writing directions.
So what are your thoughts though? Is this, I know there's no guarantees, but is 5 days realistic?
I think 5 days is realistic. Clearly we need to make an assessment each and every day. We'll look very, very closely in the 24 hours leading up to the 5 day period, but we will have a great number of results back, and we'll have almost all, if not all, of those primary close contacts through. But it does depend on whether new cases emerge or any other surprises that might occur. But I'm confident that 5 days is enough. But we'll do whatever's necessary to get on top of this.
Sorry, looking at it from a simplistic layman's point of view, this strain is very, very virulent. It's meant to rip through the community. But so far, there's no evidence of that, is there? We've had one community transmission today, and it's been basically out there almost a week. So are you surprised there's not more cases?
No, I'm not. I think the way that we've chased down cases and their close contacts and their secondary close contacts is part of that containment strategy. It's certainly shown itself to be infectious. The way that it's transmitted to household members at a high rate and in a rapid period of time is a sign of its infectiousness. But we've chased down each and every case immediately, and I think that's the difference. But the way that it's played out globally, and this is the same virus, that variant of concern, the B117, has taken off. It's taken off across the UK, now becoming the predominant strain in many countries in Europe, and doubling every week, 10 days, in terms of its prevalence in the United States. It is looking like an extremely infectious virus. That doesn't mean that you can't get on top of it, but it does mean that you've got to have everything lined up and really robust in order to do so. And this short, sharp circuit breaker is part of that effort.
This virus has been around since September, and we're just hearing so much about how infectious it is now, and we weren't really hearing about the risk it poses to the community when tennis players are coming into the Australian Open. I suppose my question is, how is it that New South Wales hotel quarantine can take residents with the UK strain and not have it leak from their hotels where Victoria would just become unlucky again?
Well, I think hotel quarantine has shown itself to be a challenge across all of those places where there's a formal hotel quarantine process in place. A number of, and breaches is the wrong word, sometimes it's everyone doing the right thing, policy settings appropriate, but a hugely infectious virus. New Zealand's had multiple episodes, Sydney's had it, Brisbane's had it, Perth's had it, South Australia's had it, and Melbourne's had it. So we all have to face up to the reality that getting to zero risk is an almost impossible challenge, but it doesn't mean that we don't look at each and every circumstance and make sure that if there's tightening of policy, if there's tightening of procedure, if there's any process of critical review, that we don't make changes accordingly. But it's not to say that this is unique to any place that has a formal quarantine program. And clearly the places that have a pretty high throughput, and we've had 35,000+ through Melbourne, have a significant risk of these circumstances occurring. That's part of the risk assessment that we need to do going forward.
There are figures today that with contact tracing, that 8.9% were not contacted on Monday within 48 hours, and that ballooned out on Tuesday to over 43%. Were you concerned about that?
No, the common operating picture, you can Google it, common operating picture COVID, is published on the Australian Government website. For the week, it's above 95% for contact tracing within 48 hours. There are small subsets for people who we regard as primary close contacts that are sometimes a small and tricky subset to contact. So that includes, we've made, for example, some exposure sites, we've made them primary close contacts. So instead of regarding them as casual and just saying, please test and go back to your normal business after you test negative, we've said you need to quarantine for 14 days. We're going to follow you up robustly for that 14-day period. Some of those exposure sites, we can only capture them through QR codes, and the information in those QR codes are not as straightforward as when you do a full interview of a case to find out their primary close contacts and so on and so forth. But overall, and again, it's public information, we're at over 95%, and the last common operating picture I've seen has us at 1.3% beyond that 48-hour period. I think that goes to February 11.
The Senate this morning has cast some doubt over the claims that the UK virus presenting in Victoria at the moment is travelling or spreading at a speed that's faster than anything seen anywhere else in Australia, as something indicated yesterday. Where's the proof that there's a faster infection cycle with what we're seeing in Melbourne, and are you willing to share some of that evidence?
With small numbers, and we've got small numbers in Victoria at the moment, we can't draw very broad conclusions. There is some evidence from overseas that the serial interval, the time between generations of cases, might be a day shorter than for previous variants or for previous coronavirus strains. We've clearly seen transmission occurring within a very short period of time. That may just be an artefact of the small numbers and unlucky cases in those circumstances, but we can't assume that. And we know that overall there's very strong evidence for 40 to 70% greater infectiousness with the B117 strain, and so we shouldn't be surprised if we see short incubation periods and high attack rates within households. So a large number of transmissions within households. Normally that's a minority of cases, but it's a significantly higher proportion with the B117 strain.
Are you feeling I know obviously tomorrow and Monday, Tuesday are really the key dates, but are you feeling confident with just one case today, or?
I'm always going to be happier with one case compared to 5, absolutely, but there's no complacency here. We are chasing down the almost 1,000 primary close contacts to make sure that they're all interviewed, they're all tested. We have to make sure that each and every primary close contact and their close contacts are isolating appropriately. So there's no sense of sitting back on our laurels here. We will chase this down with a vigour like nothing else.
I don't know whether this is for you or for the Premier, but in terms of construction, what construction should be continuing now and what should be stopped?
I'll let the Premier answer. Certainly the public health advice is pare back where you possibly can for non-essential construction work, but there are circumstances where it's a safety issue to do so very rapidly, and sometimes over a period of 5 days it's really not appropriate to go through that just to build up again. But I'll let the Premier answer.
I really can't add any more than what.
The age has spoken to that man. He tested negative before he got on the plane. He tested negative when he arrived, and then he tested negative on day 3 of his quarantine, then tested positive on day 11. Is there any, could he have caught it in the hotel, and how have you ruled that out?
Well, the incubation period for all of these viruses is 14 days, so clearly it could have been caught any time in the 14 days prior to that positive result, and he might have been positive if he'd been tested earlier in that hotel quarantine period. Conceivably, people can have a period of time where they're positive without showing symptoms or never show symptoms. There's a lot of virus in Europe. I think you can be as precautionary as possible, but the force of infection pressure in those countries for people who are getting on planes is really tremendous. and so I think the likelihood is it's still been acquired there, no matter how precautionary he's been. And I take it on face value he did everything in his power to protect himself and his family. Equally on the plane, people were wearing masks, but everyone sits down for a meal. There are a lot of people sitting next to each other. It's a closed internal environment for hours and hours on end, and so that's a risk as well, transmission on the flight. That said, we don't have a match with others who were on that flight who also subsequently tested positive in hotel quarantine. So I think it's been acquired in country of origin.
There's no risk that there's another index that has been had retail that we don't
Well,
know
we
about?
would have found that. Everyone's being tested through the entire hotel quarantine period, early on, at the end of quarantine, and again, this is a detection that has been linked to no other cases in hotel quarantine that might have been transmitted on the flight or earlier. Say again. Oh, so there's multiple levels. There's a kind of primary care through HCA providing a routine medical assessment and responding to any kind of primary care needs, if you like, and also able to escalate appropriately. And Alfred Health can step in if people have complex care needs, and they'll look after them in a complex care hotel setting where they continue their quarantine but can have chronic illness or complex illness dealt with as well.
Back on ventilators and hotels again.
Sure.
That's on the people who are essentially doing that have to Victoria. Do they have like a strict checklist that they have to ask these people? Sort of what's included in that list, just in terms of asking about the nebulizer and how that was.
Oh, they're almost certainly questions for Emma Cassar, so this afternoon she'll be able to answer as the Commander Operational Lead for quarantine. But yes, there's a checklist, there's a routine process that goes through with every arriving international traveller.
Professor, that new infection site, this might be for Jerome, the Point Cook Cafe, is that related to today's new infection? And the Albert Park Cafe as well? Yep.
No other issues?
Thank you.
Thank you all. Please get tested if you have any symptoms whatsoever. That's the most important thing to do. We'll probably see you tomorrow.
Thank you.